Hello, I'm Harold Monroe, editor-in-chief at the Vancouver Sun, joined by City Hall columnist for the Vancouver Sun and Province, Dan Fumano. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Harold.
So you did something I thought was very very insightful. Went to the city and you got a bunch of data, put it all in one place, and you were able to analyze and show people what was happening along the Broadway corridor in terms of well, I guess all different types of applications. So what is it that you did, and then what did you find out?
Yeah, so it's been almost 2 years now since the previous city council approved and adopted the Broadway plan. So it's kind of a plan to guide development over the next few decades in the Broadway corridor along where the subway is under construction. It's a big area of about 500 city blocks. And so now that the plan's been in place for a while and we know that developers are submitting applications, we thought it would just be kind of useful to get sort of a snapshot of where we're at right now. Like just as you walk around through the Broadway plan area, through kind of Mount Pleasant and Fairview and Kitsilano, if you're going through main streets, side streets, you've started seeing these big blue rezoning application signs popping up.
Yes.
And so you're seeing more of these, and we just wanted to get a sense of try to look at it holistically. So I asked the city for data to just kind of show what kinds of applications have they had so far, but breaking them out by the type of application and how far along in the process it was and the location of the application. So the city had provided us with a spreadsheet with a bunch of data that kind of gave us a look at this point in time what the developers are moving forward with. So most of these projects, the city's received about 50 rezoning applications already. And then there's another almost 100 or so where they haven't gotten to they haven't submitted applications yet, but they're in the sort of the pre-application phase. Um, so of the 50 rezoning applications that have been submitted to the city, there's really only a couple that are actually under construction now. Most of these have yet to break ground, but it's entirely possible that some of these may never move forward, right? Obviously, things change in the development market and market conditions change, so some of these might never move forward. But we thought it was just useful to get a bit of a sense of what kinds of projects is the city receiving interest about. Because when the city designed the plan and sort of presented it to council, at that time they described what their priorities were for the plan, what their hopes were, what kinds of projects they wanted to see. So it's kind of interesting to see, how does the reality line up with what they were trying to do. And yeah, so the thing that's interesting, I mean, one of the things that we thought was interesting was that when the city hall designed the plan and presented it to council, both council and the city planners were saying that their big priorities were adding a lot of rental housing, market rental and below market rental housing in the area, as well as job space. So that's kind of industrial, often like light industrial, but also offices and stuff. They wanted to add lots of rental homes and job space to this corridor to, in their words, kind of take advantage of this multi-billion-dollar transit investment. Strata, adding new strata, condos, market condos was not really a big priority. It is possible through the plan to develop strata, but the city hall, built the political leadership, the planning department, they did not see that as being a big priority, which is, other area plans in Vancouver and other places in Metro Vancouver, other area plans have sometimes led to big rushes of condo development, but the city felt like rental should be the priority. Anyway, so it is interesting to see that, that is what developers are responding with. There's something like 6,200 new market rental homes that are being proposed for this corridor. So 6,200 market rental homes, as well as about 1,300 below market rental homes. And that's because a lot of these projects, the city had kind of designed a plan where if you're building If you're building a strata building, you can go up to a certain height. If you're building a rental building, you go up to a certain height. But if you include 20% of the homes at below market rates, you can go up to a bigger building. And they were trying to sort of incentivize that to increase the supply to getting below market, sort of partially subsidized, more affordable homes, but being built with private investment without a major investment of like public money going into building the homes. And so developers seem to be interested in that. So, you've got this 7,500
Right.
rental homes and only 125 condos. So the vast majority, I'm not sure offhand what that percentage is,
Right.
but
Right.
the vast majority of homes that developers are looking to build are rental homes, purpose-built
Yeah, so,
rentals.
I mean, that's almost the reverse of what we would see in the
Totally.
past.
It's the reverse of what we've seen in the past. There were years going back in like the 2000s, like 2007, 8, 9. There were years where the city of Vancouver was building thousands of condos and, there were lots of individual detached homes were getting built. Usually, you knock down an old home, build a new home, and there's, one for one replacement. And there were huge condo construction boom, but there were years where there were literally zero rental homes getting built in the whole city of Vancouver. And so obviously now there's been a change, and it took a while, and you had successive city councils trying to say, what can we do with our levers to increase the supply of rental housing and incentivize it and get the building sector to build more of this. And so they're doing it. And obviously provincial and federal governments have been doing what they can as well to incentivize that type of construction. So that was one interesting thing we thought. There is also uh, a lot of office space, other kinds of space too, retail and service space, hundreds of thousands of square feet of retail space,
Right.
industrial space. There's at least one hotel proposal that's in the early pre-application stage. Uh, there's some childcare, cultural space, but there's a significant amount of office space being proposed for this. So we tallied up about 1.37 million square feet of office space in a variety of uh, in a couple different projects in the corridor. And those are ones that's kind of interesting to see what happens there, because the office market, we know, has been tougher. So there's
It
obviously,
has, but are these all proposed post-pandemic though? Were they all proposed in the last 2 years?
I mean, they would have been, yeah, they would have been,
Oh,
because the plan itself wasn't approved until 2022. So
oh,
these applications would have been submitted at some point post 2022. But we, the thing is, there's such a long lag time between submitting an application and actually getting it approved and breaking ground on it. So it could be that people want to submit their applications and kind of see what things are like a year or 2 years, 3 years from now. And they'll be making decisions about whether to move forward or not. I mean, just recently, obviously, there was a pretty high profile proposed office development in Vancouver that was basically where the developer said they were not going to move forward with it. The Bonus Properties has the 800 block of Granville Street above the Commodore Ballroom, right? The block where the Commodore and the Orpheum are. And the Bonuses were proposing to do a big, huge office development that would kind of go above the Commodore and encompass most of that block. And they basically said, we're putting this on hold just because the market for office space doesn't appear to be rebounding as much as they might have hoped post pandemic. So that's something they were trying to advance post pandemic, but I guess maybe they had hoped for a rebound in the office market that they weren't seeing materialize, and so they're going to try to figure out something else to do with those properties. But so similarly, I mean, it's hard to say how much of this office space will get built, or if maybe some of it. I mean, there's still a huge demand for industrial space,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Now, even though this is industrial space, like not all industrial space is the same, right? There are some const- different kinds of industrial space, and there would be some constraints for building here as opposed to in sort of more outlying areas. But a lot of that industrial space I think is like biotech and stuff. Like I think a lot of it, I believe, is connected with just a couple of major projects. Like Abcelera is doing they're doing a huge
Right.
expansion there, right? So
Yeah, and that's considered industrial, even though it's
I
not
believe
what
so. Yeah. because
some
like
people might think of
laboratories.
as industrial
Yeah.
with smokestacks, etc. It's not that kind of
Yeah.
industrial.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
more modern industrial.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that it's almost 300,000 square feet in retail and service space, which I
Yeah.
gather includes things like restaurants and
I believe
other
so. Yeah.
types of
Yeah.
shops. Yeah, because you don't necessarily think of bricks and mortar retail as expanding, but certainly there's always new restaurants opening all the time.
Yeah.
So
No, and I think yeah, and there does seem to be, I mean, yeah, I mean, we do hear that retail vacancies are an issue in Vancouver. Obviously, the
yes,
cost of property taxes and rent and everything, it's a tough city for retailers to make a go of it, but it includes like services. So there's any number of like different kinds of, you know, medical clinics or
right, right.
whatever kinds of other like customer facing services.
Right.
But
Is that
again,
is that a requirement for these rental buildings too? Do they have to have retail at the street level typically?
I don't know if they have to have retail at the street level, but I believe in some cases, if they have certain kinds of uses incorporated in the building, then they might be able to build a bit bigger. And like childcare would be one of those things as well. There's
Right.
obviously a well-documented need for more licensed childcare spaces. So that's one of the things. But also the city is actively trying to incorporate more small scale retail into these growing neighborhoods so that ideally more and more people can walk to daily needs. So the idea is like people don't need to get in their car to go to the grocery store. If you've got a grocery store a block or two away from you, you might be more likely to just walk there. And you don't need to use your car as much. And or just yeah, things like daily needs, like whether it's dry cleaning, pharmacy, just basic kinds of things. Because that's kind of a identified priority for the city's planning department, both in the Broadway plan as well as in this broader Vancouver plan that they've been working on, is trying to increase like the coverage, like increase the amount of people in the city who do not need to rely on a car to go to the grocery store, for example. I mean, so the only residential development that's currently under construction right now is this big PCI development at Broadway and Granville above the future Granville subway station. Um, and so that was approved kind of ahead of the overall plans approval through a bit of a weird process. It's kind of a long story there, but so that's under construction now. And a key thing there is that it includes a massive grocery store. And you think about that Broadway and Granville area and the Fairview Slopes around there is a big, busy area that's had lots of residents living there for a long time. And there's really no grocery store close to there. It's really weird how it's a big, busy, popular area. There's lots of other kinds of businesses, but it's not easy for people who live there to walk to a grocery store. And so this was just kind of seemed like an obvious need so that development, which is under construction now, will try to address that need for that immediate area. But I think, yeah, but more broadly, these other developments, the city is trying to get, developments to do more than one thing in a lot of cases.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the one at the future SkyTrain station. Is it your sense that the first buildings to be completed will be the ones closest to the SkyTrain stations, or not necessarily? Are they
I
more
mean,
spread out?
no, not necessarily. Like this PCI, this one, because it's going to be literally like directly above the SkyTrain station. So they needed to
Right.
kind of make the construction work. I'm not, I don't know if I could guess which the next ones to break ground might be. There
Right.
is another one that very just recently got, there was another residential property that got a rezoning approved just very recently, but they don't have a development permit yet or anything. So that would appear to be the furthest along, and that's at like Fourth and Main, and I think it's replacing some old industrial or commercial space, and it would be a mix of market rental, below market, and some retail. So that
Okay.
one, but of course, so that one is further along because council has approved the rezoning now, but what we're hearing from a lot of developers now is that the market conditions right now are pretty tough And so even when they have permits in hand, they're not necessarily moving forward with construction in this environment because construction costs are so high, the labor market is so tight, and crucially, interest rates are very high. So it makes it very difficult to move forward with projects, even when you've got them approved. So there might be some waiting. Now, obviously, various levels of government, Vancouver's municipal government, the provincial government, the federal government, all of them have said they really want to dramatically boost housing, especially rental housing close to transit, like what this is. So they're hoping to do everything they can to hear that projects are not being delayed. But
Right. So
but
there are some low interest loans that those various
yes,
levels of government are
exactly.
backing to try
So
to keep them on track.
exactly. So that's something that could
Yeah.
make a difference here. And that's the federal government just in their budget, I guess earlier this month, they're expanding that and they're kind of expanding and modifying that program for doing low interest loans for construction. But that's all, that's, I guess we'll see how that new revamped version of that program rolls out. But that's one thing people are pointing to, that could
Right.
make a difference
Right.
in making some of these projects viable.
Is
But
there anything, finally, is there anything in the new various pieces of new provincial legislation around housing, particularly, I guess, as it talks to density around in
yeah,
transit hubs and that kind of thing? Anything there that will either help or hinder the plan that the city brought in 2 years ago?
yeah. So this did come up in my conversation with the city planners, and so I'm just going by memory here. They said, I mean, I think they said that most of the plan, so 80 something percent of the Broadway plan, the densities and heights, building heights and stuff, exceed what the province is, the minimums the province is setting out in their transit oriented area
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
rules.
Yeah.
But there are certain parts of the plan of the Broadway area where the province's transit oriented area legislation will require a bit of a rethink. So city staff are working on that now and are planning to come back to council. Well, they're actually going to go out to the public within a month or two, I think, and say, do some public engagement, say, here's what we're thinking, here's how we might try to modify the Broadway plan to comply with what the province is doing. So most of the plan, it's not going to be an issue. The immediate areas right around the stations have really big heights.
Right.
But there are a few places within the plan where the city thinks they might need to change the plan a little bit to comply with the province's rules. And they're going to go out to the public, I think in June or something, and then probably go back to council, I think in the fall, to seek direction on how to, yeah, on approving these modifications to bring it in line with what the province is doing.
There certainly doesn't seem to be anything, at least we're not hearing anything from Mayor Sim or ABC or even the other councillors, um, in terms of negativity about the provincial plan. Unlike some other cities that
So,
have been complaining about various aspects of it, like it did seem to align with the city's ambitions
it
pretty well.
largely aligns with what
Yeah.
Vancouver's council, both the ABC majority and the other non-ABC councillors. I think it largely aligns with what they're doing. When you talk to City of Vancouver staff, same as what you hear from staff in other city halls, in other municipalities in BC, they're saying it's a lot. Like they feel like they're having to work overtime to having to move very fast to try to meet the province's kind of deadlines for coming into
Right.
compliance with this new stuff. So they say it's a lot. It's a very condensed timeline. We're having to move very fast. So they are saying that, but I mean, at least in Vancouver and a lot of other places, they're not saying they don't want to do it.
Right.
But
Right.
they're feeling it's having to move pretty fast. But I mean, I think that's probably from the province perspective, kind of the idea is that yeah, we need to get on with this, and going fast is probably a priority for them.
Right. All right. Well, it's good. Well, I could talk about this all day, as you know, Dan. So we'll stop it there and
Yeah,
we'll come back again next week. Thank you.
great. Okay, thanks, Harold. Thank you.